Hello, it's the Great Canadian Bagel here, coming to you with the next update to the French presidential election prediction series. So, just to start right off the bat here, uh, obviously numbers have progressed. Macron is still dominating the polls. He's slipping a little bit, which is what I expected, and I expect going forward he is going to start slipping more. Next week, I think he's going to decay further back towards the 24-26 range. He was sitting around prior to the Russia-Ukraine war. I don't know how much right now, but I don't think it's going to be all the way there. I think by the time election day comes around, his entire bump from the Russia-Ukraine war will have gone, will have dissipated. So I think it's going to dissipate even more over this week. But naturally, even though it has started to dip a little, because my model lags polling and polling lags public opinion, my model's still going up for him. Interestingly enough, the Marine Le Pen is also doing better right now in the polls. That one I can't really explain. Maybe Zemmour voters, since Zemmour is much more anti-NATO than Le Pen, are switching back to Le Pen. But then you look at the polling numbers, and it doesn't really seem to jive with what's actually happening. Zemmour still roughly 25 to 30% of the 2020 or 2017 Le Pen voters, so he's still in the same margin range there. So it seems unlikely that it's Zemmour voters going back to Le Pen. So I'm not really sure how to explain Le Pen's bump right now. I'm not sure really where it's coming from. Maybe there's some campaign intricacies that I am missing because I do not speak French very well at all. So some intricacies of it may be missed on my end, but she seems to be going up in the polls. Zemmour looks like he's stemming the bleeding, but it's still going down. Pécresse is just collapsing. I think she's going to fall down to around 11%, and I'm not sure she's going to make a comeback. And then Mélenchon, he's the big winner. I think he's having actual real gains right now, and he's now at 10.7, and he's getting pulled up 13-14 range, so we might even see him threaten a second place where he's going. That, I think, would really depend on what happens when Macron starts losing steam. Does he lose steam by bleeding his left wing, or does he bleed his right wing, or does he bleed both equally? That we do not know yet, but I think that will be the deciding factor for if Mélenchon can get to second place. Right now, he's not close to it. He has not pulled second place, so I do not have a second round prediction for him. Though, that said, a lot of pollsters are now polling second round potential for him. So there is a lot of people believing that he could, in fact, get second place. At least enough to ask the polling question. Now, that all said, there's really not too much to talk about. There is some funny incidents here where Le Pen's it's increasing her support in some departments. Well, technically most departments because her numbers are going up. So some of these are getting darker for her, but at the same time, Macron's also doing better in these. So like, if we pick Ardennes here, she's doing better in Ardennes, but Macron's doing more better in Ardennes, but he's so far behind to begin with that it's not really showing. So it looks like she's consolidating up here, but it's not really. It's more like the field is narrowing down to 2 candidates. Maybe 3 if we talk about Mélenchon, and maybe 4 if we talk about Zemmour. Right now, Mélenchon is reliably pulling above Zemmour. Zemmour is about 4th place again, Pécresse is about 5th, and Mélenchon's about 3rd if you just look at raw polling. We'll see if that continues. But this would be a great map for Macron going into it, though I have a sneaking suspicion that if he does end up getting a result like this, his 3rd round legislative results are not going to be very good, because I think people will immediately have buyer's remorse if they're voting for Macron because of a foreign policy concern and not for domestic concerns. And as I can tell from the campaign and from the polling, his bump is not anything to do with domestic policy concerns. It's 100% foreign policy related. And in my experience and in my research, foreign policy concerns do not last very long on public consciousness. So we will see. Now let us go to. Ooh, I did not mean to zoom in. To second round for Le Pen versus Macron. So Macron's doing better in the second round, more better. That should not be surprised to anyone. He's polling again in the 30% range, 29 to 31% range in the first round. Le Pen's doing a bit better. She's polling 17.5 to like 19.5 range, whereas a couple weeks ago she was polling like 16 to 18. But that's still terrible. By terrible, I mean it's not enough. Like her little bump is not enough to compensate Macron's bump, because Macron's bump is quite large. And in particular, Le Pen was getting a lot of the second round choice votes from Zemmour voters, and Zemmour's cratered. So Le Pen's went up about maybe 1 to 2 points. I'd say 1 on average. But Zemmour's dropped about 3 points on average in like the raw polling. Obviously, my model legs the raw polling, so he's going to be doing slightly better in the polling in my model right now than he's doing in actual polling. So she's doing quite a lot worse. That said, if we pop over to raw data, oops, not that screen. Go here. Zemmour is also doing even more worser. That's not a word, but and Pécresse is also doing horrific, doing very poorly. She's now firmly behind Le Pen, and she's on par polling wise with Zemmour right now. She's just being carried right now because the turnout rates for Macron versus Pécresse election are so low. are enough lower, and it's not even really reflected in my absentee data here, but like for example, the last week she's had an entire point drop, whereas Zemmour is about 0.7 and turnout rate, and Le Pen is about 0.5. We go to just overall numbers. Roussel's almost on par. I think he's probably still has some room to gain in the model. I think next week he's probably going to be a saturation point, unless he starts losing ground. As we see here, Zemmour's lost a bit more. Pécresse has lost a lot. And really, every single candidate but Mélenchon, Le Pen, and Macron are losing ground right now. Well, and Roussel, but Roussel's only gaining ground because he was added to the model later than everyone else. So yeah, in general here, the field is narrowing, which we should expect. The field was always going to narrow going into the final few weeks, as people, for example, supporting Jadot or Hidalgo are like, oh, well, my candidate can't win, so I'm going to vote for somebody who can. Obviously, that's not everybody, but strategic voting is always a consideration in any election and any voting system. The type of strategic voting changes, but it is always a thing that will exist. So the front is narrowing. The questions remain in the, what is it, there's 11 days left in March, the last 21 days, last 3 weeks of the campaign here. The remaining questions really boil down to how long does Macron keep his momentum he's gained from the Russia-Ukraine war? How long does Le Pen continue to gain steam, or is she at her saturation point? Is she going to start falling down or stagnating? Can Zemmour or Pécresse make a comeback? And can Mélenchon gather enough support to breach second place? These are really the only questions we have left. At the moment, it doesn't look like anyone has a realistic chance of beating Macron in the second round. Even if we go back to before the Russia-Ukraine war on, say, February 20th, no one was beating him. Now, mind you, I think the Zamor numbers are underballed. I think he's going to do better than any of these if he was second round. But that's neither here nor there, because he's almost certainly not going to make it at the moment. So, we are left with a big question here. Can Macron keep his momentum going another 3 weeks? Because the big concern for Macron is since he's doing quite well, since he's doing very well in the polls now, if it slips a lot, like if he starts dropping like rapidly, not like a slow gradual decline back to his original poll numbers. If he has a rapid drop in polling support, like we're talking, let's say next week he loses 3 or 4 points, the inverse of what happened when he gained the support, I could see a different kind of narrative starting to take hold where Macron's campaign is floundering, he's falling apart, and publicity like that, especially in a French election with so many candidates, can cause more damage. Now let's see. Let's think. What would happen if Macron starts losing support rapidly? Not necessarily because anything he did, just because people no longer voting for foreign policy concerns. They decided to go back to the pre-Russia-Ukraine war status quo. If that just happened by next update, what would happen? And, well, Macron would drop 4 or 5 points in the polls. Very significant loss. I think you would get a lot of people starting to question, is his campaign falling apart? There'd be a lot of bad publicity, and he might precipitate more losses from him. I still think he would make it to the second round, but it does make the second place open up. Because where do the people go who leave his campaign? I think you would see quite a few of them go to Pécresse. Some would probably go to Mélenchon. Some would probably go to Le Pen. Some would even go to Zemmour. I think these top 5 candidates here are the ones where the bleeding will go. People like Hidalgo or Jadot or Dupont-Aignan or Jean Lassalle, who I'm not tracking, I don't think are going to gain much of the vote because it's so close to election day that it's unlikely you would see mass movement to them. I think you're going to see mass movement, if there is one, to one of the people who are double digits, and likely one of the people who has momentum. So I think any left-wing voters defecting from Macron are probably going to go to Mélenchon, just because he's the only one who really has momentum on the French left right now. For the French right, it's much murkier because there's 3 different candidates, obviously. And more importantly than that, there's important philosophical differences between the candidates. Like, obviously, Zemmour and Le Pen have more in common than they disagree with. But the way they go about it and the way they articulate their concerns there is a stark difference. This is why they're 2 different candidates. Obviously, if they were identical, they would not be both running. So it's hard to guess where people currently voting for Macron from the right, from his right wing, might go if he disintegrates. But this is all speculation. I don't think he's going to disintegrate, but I think he is going to continue losing some support. I think possibly he lost about 1 to 2 percentage points, depending on the pollster, over this last week. I think you might see that go up to another 1 to 2 percentage points this week, maybe a third. And then by the end of March, he might be going back to quote-unquote normal levels of support. But if it's a gentle enough slide, I don't think it's going to actually harm his campaign. We'll just have to see going forward. Otherwise, I hope you all have a good week, and I will see you next video. If you liked it, please like, share, subscribe. Comment below what you think is going to happen. Do you think Macron can keep his support going? And if he can't, where do you think it's going to go? Otherwise, see you all next video.